Hello and welcome to One on One. I'm Vernon Ramazan, and I'm actually quite thrilled to say my guest today is Father Clyde Harvey, parish priest for Rosary St. Martin, East Port of Spain. Father Harvey, welcome to the program.
Good to be here and good evening.
It's always good to have you on. I mean, even in trying times, and perhaps especially so, because I enjoy our conversations before and after the interviews almost as much as I do the actual interviews. Over the weekend, we had something that, of course, brought our crime problem in Trinidad and Tobago sharply back into focus again, the murder of Senior Counsel Dana Setahel. And I think it was a murder that had tremendous social impact because it indicated to people, although every murder is horrible, that in the case of Ms. Setahel, it was somebody of great national importance so that nobody is insulated from the crime problem. You deal with people of all levels. You deal with the impact that crime has on us as a society. How do you think that event changed the picture, or did it change the picture?
We'll have to wait and see whether it has changed the picture, in fact, because as people have been reminding us over the past 2 days, there are instances where we've had the same kind of hullabaloo, rise in temperature and everybody calling for, somebody's neck, and then nobody's arrested, nobody's charged, and we seem to go back to normal. So that is why I'm very happy that a number of people have called and made it very clear that this is really a test case for the police on which we can't go back, that we must solve it. And my particular concern is that we don't just solve it in terms of the arrest of a few fellas who are shooters or who actually may have perpetrated the deed, but the police have to take us to the origin. We have to find out. When I look at the Bindra, the Kuhlman-Naipaul-Kuhlman thing, what strikes me is you have 10, 12 young men on trial, but nobody has been brought to book in terms of who got those guys to do what they did, if they did it, And that's something which I think the whole population has to be absolutely clear about. We want no scapegoats. Either you're giving us the real perpetrators of the deed, or tell us you can't. Don't just lock up a few people, Like, I find it very hard to accept that somebody can put in a national newspaper that a policeman tipped off, and that policeman is not arrested immediately for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. I don't understand that. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't understand it. So that we have to be very clear with the police. We want the truth, or shut up and move out of the way.
Would it be fair to say, I mean, we do have a horrifically high number of homicides, and that, of course, leads to a certain change in the national psyche. But isn't part of the problem also the fact that we have a high number of homicides and not a lot of detection? So people are able to commit crime with impunity, and that is where the problem arises.
Well, that is partly where the problem arises, yes. I would certainly agree with that. But you see, it's one of those issues where either everybody works to get at it, or everybody's being tripped up in trying to get at it. And right now, nobody has been able to inspire this country to say, we have had enough. Right? It has been all along, we tired, we fed up, yes. But to organize the population to say, we have had enough. And in that regard, I think the politicians have a lot of responsibility, because everybody in this country believes now that they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. On the one hand, they say, oh, we will do this and we do that. I would love to replay the tapes after significant murders over the last year and remind one or two people that they've said the same thing after every significant murder, exactly the same thing.
We had some prominent murders of children, and after each one, and you're quite right, we heard, never again, this can't be allowed to happen to our children. And then a few months, a year later, the same thing happens again, we hear it again. So to a certain extent, the population is inured to anything that is said.
Sure. And that means that there is not a political will to deal with things at the origin, at the root, right? For instance, I'm very clear that a major factor in all of this is the education system. We have an education system that is failing large numbers of our young people. A teacher sent me the other day statistics about the failure rate in one school, and it's shocking. It's absolutely shocking when you think of the number of children who are getting less than 50% in examinations across the board. And this is not a school that is not considered to be a better school that people would like their child to go to. It's a school that people like thinking, my child is going to this school. but the failure rate in the school is something else. And what we have is a situation where teachers are not taking responsibility for the failure of their students. Teachers are immediately either blaming the child's stupid, or, but there are serious social problems here, right? The problem of inequality of opportunity, I'm not hearing very much from the Equal Opportunities Commission, but if we take that issue, equal opportunity, seriously, in education we have a real problem, that our children do not have an equal opportunity, right? Because in a certain sense, from the moment you come from a certain area, there's a presumption that you can't work. And what we know from the research is that if a teacher comes to a classroom believing that a child is a failure before they even start to teach, they're not getting anywhere.
Or the child believes themselves to be a failure because of where they're from.
Precisely.
And you mentioned, it applies to that as well, we seem to be an endlessly elastic society. We don't seem to have a breaking point. Whereas, in other societies, when you have a point where the public will show up with pitchforks in front of City Hall or in front of the government house, here we'll put up with and complain and gripe and write to the newspapers, but we never actually turn that into action.
But I would relate that to that as well, to the education system, because we are not educated to understand clearly two things, our rights and our duties. And unless, as a society, you are in fact educating people to understand both things, we have a pledge, but the pledge is not enough. The pledge must say to me, must help me, or at least what comes with the pledge, must help me to understand that if I am a citizen of this country, then there are certain things. And in that regard, I think we have failed to really understand what a republic is about. The other day it just crossed my mind, we are still subjects. We are still subjects. We still have the mentality of a subject rather than the mentality of a citizen. The mentality of a subject sees your leader as king or queen, and with all due respect, I see both political parties are regalizing leadership. That is part of the political campaign. You are the king, you are the lord, you are the doctor, you are the queen, and as long as you do that, people have an attitude of obsequience, of fawning, and so on. And I hate it when I watch the television newscasts and the reception that your political leader gets when he or she mounts a stage. It's making me into a subject, and no political leader has been able to challenge the membership of a party to move away from that.
It's interesting because, if you look at the American example, if anybody called President Obama King Obama, that would be taken as an insult.
Precisely.
Whereas here we see it as an elevation to the highest possible office you could ever hope to attain. You hear, the public is perhaps, as you say, to a certain extent not educated as much as it should be, perhaps for whatever failings of our education system or our society. But whenever anything like this happens, the first things that you hear coming out of people's mouths, and I think it'll be interesting to hear your viewpoint, is that we're not beating our children enough. People need more Jesus, or pick a deity.
Don't stop me on that.
Well, and that this is all because we don't have the death penalty. How do you respond to those sort of gut reactions that people have?
Where do we have the death penalty? We have the death penalty in the United States, and that's stopping nothing. That is stopping nothing. That's a distraction. You see, because we all
Wouldn't you have to catch them before you even get to that point?
But not only that, that's the easy solution, which will not work.
It's a bloodthirsty solution.
In my worst moments, I say, perhaps let them hang a few and see what happens, and they realize that nothing happens, because it's not about punishment alone. It is about whether or not our values in the society are such that people want to subscribe to those values. Right now, we are in a situation, again bringing us back to education, where people are not subscribing to certain values. And in very indirect ways, we promote precisely the kind of values that destroy the society. I was very, I don't know whether to say shocked or disappointed, when I saw the ante going up on the reward for Dana's killers. $1 million is enough. And even that, I wonder whether we should ask that, because what you're doing, you're putting a price on the right thing, when in fact people should do the right thing simply because it is the right thing. Our president tried to push that at one point, and some people said it all, under their breath and so on, praised him for it even. But when you look at what we do, everything we put a price on, and when you put a price on everything, people don't understand what the real value is.
But also, if you put a price on one thing and you don't put a price on something else,
okay, if you
that's
want to put
inequity
in
terms of perception.
You know, and I mean, just this morning, a fellow was saying to me, "Hey, Father, you know, you think you could give me some info?" I said, give you some info. He said, "Yeah, man, I want to try for the 3.5 million, and if I get it, I'll give the church some."
It's like a lotto, is it?
You know, but again, you're fooling people because you don't say to people that, hey,
that was almost like a biblical test for you, wasn't it? I mean, it sort of has a biblical reference going on there, trying to tempt you a little bit.
But you know, this is what people don't realize in this country is they say 3.5 million, but you don't get that until the case is completed and somebody is convicted and maybe hanged. And how long does that take in this country? So don't wet your chops waiting for 3.5 million, you know.
And in terms of the argument that we don't have enough religion, I mean, I know some people who have questionable character who do go to church regularly.
Oh, I also know that in the so-called criminal underworld, people pray a lot, you know, and people pray for protection because God becomes my protector. Right? I have a lot of arguments against religion in this country as it is. God is not to be used, right? You can't use God, right? And the ease with which, you know, people talk about God is in my corner, God blesses me, and so on. You know,
God is a Trinity.
God is a Trinity. Now, that's a whole thing that needs to be explored, and you know, I wish I had the time to explore it theologically. Because if you're talking about God as a Trinity, you're talking about God in relationship. That within the Godhead itself, the business of relationship is critical. The nature of love is critical. So you can't say God is a Trinity and at the same time hate your neighbor. You know, if you're saying that, you know. But then with religion itself, we have turned religion, Christianity in particular, into a very selfish thing. It's all about me and my salvation, you know, and everybody else is the enemy. And if you really believe, you know, Pope Francis said it the other day, every person, right, is immensely holy and deserves our love. Now, that has gnawed at my mind and my heart ever since he said it. That as I sit down here talking to Vernon, I have to believe that Vernon is immensely holy. When I sit down and I talk to the guy who comes to see me off the street, so when I pass him by, lying there in all his filth, I have to believe that he is immensely holy. And what can I do of love? In that sense, I know I may be priest, but I need conversion. I need to hear the word of the Lord at a certain power. I cannot presume that because I'm going to church or because I've had a certain experience of God, that I know God. Right? There is so much more about God than any of us could ever know. Right? So we sell religion very, very short in this country. And we think we abuse God, right? In the way in which we use him. Right?
So saying that a criminal or somebody who has committed an act needs Jesus,
that's not going to solve the problem.
It's a very facile approach to it.
Yes, it is. And you see, the conversion that comes with that comes easily to people who are interested in themselves. If you tell me that I need Jesus in order to get something from you, I'll need Jesus morning and coming. Just give me what I'm supposed to get from you, you know? And a lot of that is part of our own insecurity. Now, the Christian faith at its best is about God's reign, God's kingdom, God establishing something on this earth through us. It's about God loving all of us and not just those who happen to believe, right? And that is something where we have a very sharp line of division within the Christian church, because there are Christians who can understand that God loves Hindus and Muslims and even atheists, you know, and there are Christians who say God don't love them because they're not saved. That's not the God that I believe in.
There is a sharp divide there, isn't there?
Yes, there's a very sharp divide.
But it's also rather telling that the faster growing churches, certainly in this country, are the more evangelical, not Catholic ones, that many of which are preaching this, I guess it's called the prosperity gospel,
yes.
Which seems to sort of have
because it's easy to
caught into people's imaginations.
You know? And people are not thinking deeply enough, so that for every person who comes and tells you, I got $10,000 because I believe in God, you can find, if you look sharply enough and deeply enough, 100 others who tried it and it didn't work. Right?
And you can find a lot of drug dealers who also made $10,000 by other means as well.
And who will tell you they're praying to the same God. But
to some extent, those other denominations play into this idea of selfishness to a certain extent, and dehumanizing other people to another extent. And I don't want to start a religious war here, but in terms of if you're not saved, then somehow you're lesser than, and therefore you should be viewed differently.
Well, just the other day I was talking at the funeral of a young boy, and I was giving the example, which offended some people, of a lady who came to see me, and her son had been murdered. And she said that the preacher in her church had told her he couldn't do the funeral because her son wasn't saved, and he wouldn't waste his time. Now, that's not the God I believe in. Right? The God I believe in, especially the God of the Gospel of Luke, for example, is a God who eats with sinners. Right? He dines with them. He has a relationship with sinners. And he's not asking them first, are you saved? That's not his first question to them at all. Right? His first question is quite simply, let's talk, you know? Or even when he deals with Zacchaeus, he says, I must come down, I must eat at your house today. And it's only while eating in his house that he raises some of the fundamental questions with the guy. Right? So that I, as a Christian, if I am a practicing Christian according to what I believe, I have to be open to everybody in this society. Now, that's hard. And let me take one example of that. The other day, there was a picture in the papers of the Prime Minister with the Anglican Bishop, Pastor Cuffey, and the Archbishop of Port of Spain. And some people are very offended by it. Right? Those are the people who are anti that. But no matter what you think of the Prime Minister is a daughter of God, created, I believe, in God's image and likeness. And any religious person has to treat her as such, with the respect that is due the dignity of any other human being. Right? Now, you may try, and I hope religious leaders try from time to time, to challenge her to speak truth to power. And if she's not open to that, then something is wrong. Right? And I'm not going to sort of suck up to that. Right? I'm not going to say, listen, madam, you're the greatest person on the face of the earth. Right? I can't do that.
Well, you have another leader in any case.
Right? What?
I said you have another leader in any case.
Thanks be to God.
Slightly more elevated.
But, you know, but because these people are who they are, there's nothing in the Bible that says to me that Jesus judged some people to be sinners or to be doing wrong things or to cause them a mess and refused to eat with them. Right? He called as his disciples people who were the most detested people of their time, the tax collectors and so on. Right? And that is the message of Christianity. Now, how that is used to further God's purposes, God alone knows. But I have to respect that. And I think, thanks be to God, we have a Pope now who is living that and who has lived it out even before he became Pope.
Would it be fair to say that the major messages of the New Testament are love and respect for others, and less so fear?
Oh, yeah.
Because people push the fear thing a little more.
Perfect love casts out fear. Perfect love always casts out fear. The more I get to love you, the less I'm afraid of you. And that's a mistake that people involved in domestic violence situations make. If you afraid me, you will love me, you can't leave me. Sorry, that doesn't work.
Well, does it apply to parenting as well? Because I know the Bible had some other things about parenting.
It applies to parenting as well, but if I might be a little bit controversial.
Something you're not a stranger to, but yes.
The incident with that mother, right? I think beyond the corporal punishment debate, right, which is something we will always have, I think. What struck me about that mother was several years ago, we began to talk about a basic principle of discipline, that when you go to discipline your child, whether it's corporal punishment or not, you must tell the child what they're doing wrong, right? And what I saw in that mother was a mother who was trying to live that, right? That she was telling the child, you did this, whap whap. You did that, whap whap. You did that, whap whap. Whether you believe that the mother was, whether you believe in capital punishment or in corporal punishment or not, the point is this woman was doing her best, as best as she knew how. Now, we have a responsibility in the society which we're not living up to. If we want people to move away from corporal punishment, we have to teach them what their options are. Right? So that what I would like to see, and what I'm hoping to be able to introduce into my schools, is that you teach parents from day one, listen, if you want to come to this school, if you want your child to come to this school, there are some things we will ask of you. Right? So that from infant, kindergarten, right, parents, we use that period, that kindergarten time, to teach parents when hopefully parents are open to being taught. Right?
So there's a consistency in parenting.
And yes, there must be, you see, in a certain sense, I would like to see a revolution in education, a national state of emergency in education. That's something I mentioned some time ago. A national emergency in education, where we understand that there are some things that are necessary, and we implement those things, even if teachers and parents object. We do everything that we can to get those two groups on board. And one thing is that we are paying for the education of your child is getting a free education, but you also have to be educated so you can collaborate with the teachers in what we have to do. We cannot allow parents to bring up their children in such a way that those children become a threat to the order of a school and to the lives of teachers. And that has to be made very clear as a no-no. And those who fail in that regard, we have to put structures in place for dealing with them. If a 7 or 8-year-old child is so angry in school, right, and is encouraged in that anger by the parents, both of them need help. They do not need expulsion. You know, the other day I heard an official talking about if you fail to do this or that, well then you're out of the school. Come on. We know now that you put children out of school and they get to even worse mischief. Mm-hmm. The school is the one place where we might be able to hold them. You know.
And then we all end up paying the price at some point down the line.
So we have to get serious about what we're doing in the context of the opportunities that are there, staring us in the face. And what I'm suggesting is one such opportunity is when we bring children into the school system. And if the government is saying that we're bringing them into the school system now at 3, well then every parent of a 3-year-old must go through a certain program.
We have about 4 minutes left, Father. I have to ask you, in terms of, I know it's shocking, isn't it? In terms of how we hear the public reacting when any bad incident happens, and it could be a horrible murder, it could be that viral video that you mentioned, those of us of a certain generation will immediately harken back to another time and say, well, when we were younger, we got more licks and we had more religion and schools were much stricter than they are now, and that's the solution to our problems today. Is that, to some extent, ignoring the realities of the fact that our societies have changed fundamentally from then to now?
And our young people are fundamentally different, right? I think at 2 levels. One is just a pure level of their physical being, right? Young people today, by the time they reach puberty, the amount of stuff that they have eaten, that both brings them to a certain growth level, but also we now understand creates all kinds of psychic and psychological issues, right, for them. That's one big difference. The other thing is the stimulation that they're getting, right? And then, and this for me is very, very important, teachers long ago saw themselves relating to children and to parents in a certain way, right? The teacher who beat me when I was in Woolton Hall Methodist School, right, and beat me unjustifiably, and who then had to deal with my parents, is now my friend, you know, and there was relationship there. Mm-hmm. Today, too many children in our school system have no relationship with any teacher. They are just a number, and we shut them out, and you know, and we need teachers who really understand that a part of their task is to create bonds with children which allow them then to exercise authority in the child's life. If I'm bonded with nobody, nobody will have authority over me.
Is that possible to achieve, though?
Yes, I think it is. I think it is. Because I see it happening in some schools, you know, and I've seen kids who, you know, one of the more interesting examples is the other day I met a young boy who basically was up before the law for the various things. And when I asked him, I said, who would you like to talk to? And he stepped back. See, I'm talking to you, I'll talk to anybody else. I said, well, you know, there must be somebody who you think you'd like to talk to. And he went back to primary school. A teacher who taught him when he was 7 years old. And he said, that sir, and he was like, this boy, he was tight, father.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I think a lot of us of a certain generation would think of some of the most influential people in our lives were some of the teachers that we ran across.
Precisely.
And I don't know if any of the young people
and this
now
is
feel
where
that
this
way.
is where, for the boys' sake, I think a key figure is those teachers, those male teachers who do coaching, right? Coaching basketball, coaching football, whatever. They have to see themselves in a very different role. And if I may say so, the education system has to structure the school hour so that those people who are doing that kind of work have the time to pull a kid out of class and say, hey, let's go for a drive, let's talk about this, let's talk about that. We have to creatively structure our schools, and principals have to have the power to do that. And one thing which, again, I'm against, too many principals are being called to a whole set of meetings at ministries, and they go to these meetings and they're out of the school. And they're resentful of that. Those who are really good teachers are resentful of it, but they have nobody to complain to. Nobody who is listening. Because we must get our schools organized in a particular way. We have the system organized and the children running wild.
We don't even give our kids time to be kids quite often in the school system, but that's a whole discussion for another day because we're out of time. Father Harvey, it's always an honor having you on the program. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Vernon.
A great pleasure.
Keep up your own work.
And you keep up the good work too.
To all our listeners, keep faith with Trinidad and Tobago. The creation of a nation doesn't happen in a day. When a previous administration talked about 2020, I laughed because you cannot create a nation in 25 years. It's impossible. What we are doing now is sowing seeds that we will not see the fruits of it. And so we have to keep faith with Trinidad and Tobago and trust that the blood of martyrs may well be the fruit, bear fruit in citizens of good character.
Well said, as always.
Amen.
Thank you, Father Harvey. You've been watching One on One. Join us again tomorrow for another edition.